for the next election, not just as to what they did, but how to prevent it.
Mr. Rice, the meeting was originally called to talk about the TikTok, how it all went down, the firing of James Comey and Mr. Rosenstein's role in that. Did he speak to that, his responsibility and his decision-making process in the firing of Mr. Comey?
I think he spoke to it by asserting that the record is a paper record with a chronological set of documents. What I will say, and I don't believe for a moment this is classified, is that the scope, again, of Director Mueller includes any questions about referrals related to any misconduct, any interference, and there were questions well outside the Russian scope in there, and repeatedly Rod, as acting director, said that he would feel that his job is to make sure others have the freedom to send it where it may be, including any judicial indiscretion.
Did he told him to write the memo on Comey's firing?
I don't believe he in any way indicated anyone directed him, but in fact he wrote the memo. You know, I think one thing having a decade of doing investigations has taught me is that it's suspicious when a lawyer doesn't write memos for the record. We've had investigations where they claim that didn't happen and it wasn't plausible. The fact is, one of the principles of law and particularly lawyers in all administrations is they write memos for the record. They write memos to codify what they believe happened, even in day-to-day meetings. And so the record is what it is, and there's nothing unusual about a memo. Again, it's unusual when there is no memo of something like this.
Did he explain why he decided to finally appoint a special prosecutor?
Well, I think the press has a tendency to look, and I'm no disrespect to anybody, at a timeline and say, finally. The fact is, on February 25th was the first time, as far as I know, anyone called for the recusal of the Attorney General, and I was the one that did it, and said that, in fact, there were ultimately, under the statute, need to be a special prosecutor. That's what we have now. We have a process that goes through that determines certain things in order for the highest ranking person, the Attorney General, or if recused the next, or if recused the next, to make that determination. And when you look at 8 weeks with discovery in order to determine it, that's not a very long period of time. I think in fairness, the history is fairly void of anything much faster than the time between, let's say, February 25th, when I called for a special prosecutor, and today.
So it's because
yes. I always assume somebody next has a question.
What do you think of the potential of Joe Lieberman as FBI?
I think it's great. I worked with Joe when he was my counterpart between our two committees. As everyone here knows, he's solid. He's probably a little bored in private life. He's a public servant. His experience and his independence, including independence at times from his own party, is pretty legendary. So I'm a Joe Lieberman fan, and wouldn't look at a second candidate if the president had the confidence to appoint him.
Yes. What do you make of the fact that the time frame on Comey's firing has changed? The White House initially hung it on Rosenstein's memo, but yesterday Rosenstein told senators that he was told the day before that Comey was going to be fired.
You know, that's one of the questions that came up in there, in which the Deputy AG said, let the record speak for itself. And I think that's what we have to do. The timeline will be reviewable and in fact, will be looked at that way. Again, you know, I, for one, thought that Comey ill-served the American people when he tried to stretch beyond all reason the Fourth Amendment to hack into your iPhones. So I have had a belief that he didn't respect the Constitution, had become in love with the camera, which is normally for politicians, and that he began thinking that he was somehow larger than the FBI director, and effectively being the FBI director and the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is the FBI director's boss, not the other way around.
Is Mr. Mueller on a witch hunt? Do you share the president's view?
Well, I don't personally believe in witches, but Look, the director's job is, in fact, to go where the facts lead, and he has a reputation. Now, all special prosecutors turn over a lot more rocks than anybody else in the executive branch wants. You know, the reason that the old statute, if you will, the Kenneth Starr statute, expired was because of that tendency to turn over rocks even without being asked. But I don't think the American people or our president should be concerned. I think that that this is somebody who's done a lot of investigations, and yes, he's going to find things beyond the scope that the narrowest interpretation of either Republicans or Democrats would want. But I think the American people deserve the scope to be as broad as necessary to regain confidence in our elected officials, in our appointed officials, in our elections. All of those. The deputy director or the deputy AG said it very well. His reason for doing this appointment is as much about returning public confidence. He was asked about the details of criminality, which some of you are asking, and I think he answered it extremely well in a way that isn't part of the classified part of this briefing. That the American people deserve public confidence. The statute was available to him to use to regain public confidence. And I think for all the members of the press, you're all about getting public confidence back. Without an independent and decidedly trustworthy prosecutor that has the ability to go where the facts lead and to increase his scope, if appropriate, beyond just the four corners of the Russian activity, then the American people aren't going to get their confidence back. And that's what this is all about. It took a little while, but a relatively short amount of while by Washington standards.
Do you believe Mueller will conduct a fair investigation?
Absolutely. The definition of fair will not be a Republican definition. They won't like it. A Democratic definition, at times they won't like it. And the president, at times, will be frustrated. But again, this is about public confidence. And I think most importantly, this will not be a partisan activity, even though partisans will complain one way or the other, but we need to have public confidence. And the American people aren't Republicans or Democrats; they're the American people, and they deserve the answers wherever those, that investigation leads.
And very quickly on an FBI director, what characteristics does the president need to look for in a replacement for James Comey?
Well, I've already said Joe Lieberman would work fine for me. It has to be somebody senior enough to understand how the system works and to lead it, and with the confidence of the American people, and then with enough tenacity and energy to live out a 10-year term if possible. Thank you.
Thank you.